Hey there! So let's talk about finding those hidden layers in the stories we all love. In this explainer, we're going to crack open the toolbox that literary critics use to see way beyond the surface and uncover a whole new level of meaning. You know that feeling, right? You finish a great book or a movie, and you're just left thinking, man, I feel like I missed something. You can sense there's something deeper going on, some hidden engine driving the whole thing, but you just can't quite grab it. Well, guess what? You're probably right. See, professional critics have this secret, you could say. They use these special analytical lenses to examine a story, and each lens gives you a totally unique perspective, revealing all these themes and motivations that are otherwise hidden in plain sight. So today, we're adding 3 of the most powerful ones to your personal toolkit. All right, so let's grab our first tool from the kit. This one's all about putting on our psychologist hat to look deep inside the minds of the characters and figure out what really, truly makes them tick. Basically, this lens treats a story almost like it's a dream. The idea is that, just like in our own dreams, a character's actions aren't always logical. A lot of the time, they're driven by these repressed desires, things from their childhood, and all these unconscious conflicts that they might not even be aware of themselves. And yeah, the big name behind all this is, of course, Sigmund Freud. His work basically handed critics this brand new framework for digging into literature, letting them explore all those unconscious bits and pieces that shape who a character is and the choices they make. So at the heart of this whole thing is Freud's idea of a 3-part psyche. Just picture this constant battle raging inside a character's head. You've got the id, which is like your inner toddler screaming, I want it, and I want it now. Then there's the superego, which is like the strict parent, wagging its finger and saying, absolutely not, that's wrong. And then, caught right in the middle, is the poor ego, just trying to broker a peace deal between the two. In this is a perfect example of how it all plays out. Let's take Willy Loman. His id is desperate for the American dream. You know, success, respect, all of it. But his ego is painfully aware of the reality of his own failures. This fight inside him is so intense that it just spills out into his daydreams, which is the only place he can actually live out the fantasies his real life denies him. Okay, let's put down the psychologist lens for a second and pick up a new one. This time, we're zooming out from the character's private mind and looking at the public world they're living in. This is the sociologist's view. So this approach kicks off with a really simple but powerful idea. No story is ever created in a vacuum, right? Every single book, every movie is a product of the society it came from. The politics, the economy, the culture, it all seeps into the story, whether the author intended it to or not. A really key concept here comes from this philosopher, Michel Foucault. He had this idea about disciplinary power. And it's not just about a king on a throne barking orders. It's way more subtle. It's the power built into our social institutions, schools, prisons, workplaces. They have all these rules and systems of observation that actually make us start to police our own behavior. And you know who was an absolute master of this? Charles Dickens. Seriously, the guy didn't just write stories. He uses novels like weapons to go after all the broken parts of Victorian England. And because his stories were often published in installments in popular magazines, they reached a huge audience, sparking real conversations and even putting pressure on politicians to make actual changes. So here's the kicker, and this ties it all together. When Dickens is describing the workhouse in Oliver Twist, he's showing us exactly what Foucault was talking about, a disciplinary space. The system wasn't just failing to help poor people, it was built to be miserable on purpose. It was designed to punish people for being poor and to teach them their proper place in society. All right, time for our last tool. And I gotta say, this one can be a little tricky. We're gonna have to put on our detective hats for this one, because it's all about putting the storyteller themselves under the microscope. I mean, it's a pretty basic question, isn't it? When you start a story, you kind of want to trust the person telling it. But what if you can't? What if the very person guiding you through the world has their own agenda, their own blind spots, or is just flat out lying to you? And that, my friends, is what critics call the unreliable narrator. The whole idea is that an author will sometimes create this gap on purpose, a gap between what the narrator is telling you and what the story is actually showing you. And it's in that space between those two things that you find the real story. And wow, you really can't get a more obvious clue than this one. Holden Caulfield, the narrator of The Catcher in the Rye, he just comes right out and tells you. He says, "I'm the most terrific liar you ever saw in your life." That one sentence completely changes the game. It forces you, the reader, become a detective, constantly second-guessing him and trying to figure out the truth he's trying to hide. And hey, there's even a handy little checklist you can use to spot one. As you're reading, just ask yourself these questions. Does my narrator seem a little clueless about what's really going on? Are their opinions super biased because they're so involved in the plot? And do their personal values seem to clash with the bigger message of the story? If you're nodding yes, you might just have an unreliable narrator on your hands.
Okay, so we've unpacked the whole toolbox. We've got 3 really powerful lenses that can totally change how you see a story. Let's do a quick rundown.
So you've got the psychologist lens, right? That's for digging into what's really driving the characters. Then there's the sociologist lens, which is all about how the world shaped the story. And finally, the detective's lens, where you question everything the narrator tells you and hunt for their biases.
And listen, this is the most important part. These aren't just some dusty old academic theories. They're real tools that give you, well, it's kind of like a superpower. They transform you from just a passive reader who's along for the ride into an active interpreter who's helping to unlock the story's deepest secrets. So, next time you dive into a story, whether it's a book, a movie, a TV show, whatever, which lens are you going to try on first? The psychologists, the sociologists, or the detectives? The choice is all yours.